This is Teacher Will. This is the place, hopefully, where you and we learn together. And I am back with another Ask Me question. One of the ATW family members asked me a question, so without further ado, let's hear the question, and I'll offer my thoughts, my perspectives. Here we go.
Good evening, ATW family from Germany. Let me first present myself. My name is Mohammed and this is my brother Julian.
Good evening.
We were thinking, we had a very nice conversation about the topic of identity and language. So, in which kind of matters the English language is affecting your personal identity or each other language? So how does language affect your personality? So when we change, for me example, I was born bilingual. I speak German and Arabic, and Julian speaks German and English, and I also speak Spanish. And when I change, I can say for myself, when I change the language, it's kind of being partly another person. And that's the question what we were asking. How is it to change a language, and how does it affect your personality? Julian, any comments?
Yeah, I think it's very important to be yourself, no matter in which language. Be authentic, be yourself, and it's very cool to switch the languages between the friendships you have, and then you can make a big step to make an exchange between the cultures, between the different countries, and that's very nice, and that's I think one of the important things in this life.
Exactly. Thank you, Julian. Well, that was a comment from my brother. The question is, how does the language has an effect on your personality? Thanks, ATW family, and see you soon.
All right, well, that is a very interesting question, Mohammed. Tell your brother I said hi. How does one's language, but let's specifically focus on the English language, how does the English language impact or shape one's identity? All right. Well, I think before we talk about that, I think it's important that, at least for me, you made me think about a couple of words that I want to go into a little bit more definition about. But you know what? Let me move, because it's a little hot right now, so I want to go somewhere where I can sit down and be in the shade. I'll be right back. All right, much better. I'm in the shade. So there's one word that you made me think of, and that word is culture. And for those people out there that don't know what culture means, culture is defined by, or can be defined by, how a person or group of people perceive themselves, and also how they view that they are perceived by other people or other cultures in the world. Culture is manifest, it's shown, it's illustrated by one's values, traditions, morals, through one's food, clothing, dance, religion, languages. So culture is important because culture shapes one's identity. For example, I don't leave my culture at the door when I'm teaching English, when I'm making a video, when I'm interacting with other individuals. I bring my culture with me, either directly or indirectly, based, I believe, on and in most circumstances in life. So we have the word culture. Identity. Now that's an interesting word, identity. Do you have an identity? Identity can be defined as the fact of who or what a person is. Synonyms of the word identity would include, or can include, name, recognition, individual. So we have culture, we have identity, and then relating it to English and the English language. Certainly in 2021, there are very few people that can dispute or argue the impact and the importance of learning English. Certainly, English is important for personal and professional reasons. English is considered one of the global lingua francas of the world. Over 75% of websites are constructed and written in English. English is the language of aviation or business or entertainment. So certainly a person to understand English is quite important, and it will have an impact on their, or could have an impact on their identity. So, culture, identity, are there any impacts, or more importantly, what are the impacts of when a person is learning English? Are there positive impacts, negative impacts, or no impact at all on a person? Well, personally, I think that there are some positive impacts as it relates to me knowing English and as it relates to my identity. What could one of those be? Well, my identity is shaped because hopefully through English I have the ability to communicate with another group of people or culture different from my own. And therefore my identity is shaped and formed by new relationships that I have with people and with cultures. And also my identity, hopefully, if I'm humble enough, is that because of me having an understanding of the English language, I can have sympathy and empathy for another group of individuals that has an experience, or it has experienced life different from my own. And I'm able to communicate that through English. What do I mean by that? Well, everyone in the world has certain privileges. I certainly in my life have privileges based on my nationality or based on my passport. And so therefore I should and try to have empathy by someone else's experience. What happens if they don't have the particular privileges that I've had in my life? And so that shapes my identity, and I'm able to communicate those particular experiences or my particular thoughts in English. And how else, if at all, is my identity by having English shaped? Well, it's a language, and my identity hopefully will grow, will change, will modify through English. Things that I thought of or might have thought about 5 minutes ago or 5 years ago, I don't think about, or it has no importance to me. And so therefore my identity has changed, and I'm able to communicate that in English. Now those are the positive impacts, I think, as it relates to identity. But life has taught me with positive, the opposite is negative. Do you think there are any negative impacts of learning English and how it might impact or shape one's identity? I could think of something. Possibly the negative impact of a person learning English is their identity is shaped in a negative manner. Why? Because sometimes people pretend to be something that they are not. And that is shown or manifested by what? Oh, they have to speak in a certain way in English, or they have to have a particular sound or accent, and that shapes them possibly in a negative way because they think or believe as though that they're looking for validation, acceptance, and approval of others before taking a look in the mirror and accepting themselves. So, for example, let's say that English is not my native language, and so I'm learning and I have a particular manner and style and way of which is speaking that is not considered to be the norm or standard or something that is considered valued. And so therefore I try to be something, speak like something that I'm not. Why do I do that? That can have a negative impact, because if I'm told like, oh my God, don't sound like that, don't act like that, speak like this, speak native, speak like an American, have this accent, speaking English can have a negative impact on my identity. So I think there are positive impacts, Muhammad, and negative impacts. And it's a brilliant question, because one of the things that you reminded me of that I think that it relates to my own life, and certainly I think it can relate to English learners, is the aspect of double consciousness. Have you ever heard of that term, Mohammed? Have you, learners? For those of you that have, great, and for those of you that have not, let me explain. Double consciousness was a term that was created by a gentleman by the name of W.E.B. Du Bois. He was an African-American philanthropist, civil rights leader, and he came up with this concept talking about double consciousness, that it's important that a person realizes that they have two sets of consciousness or way of thinking, particularly as it relates to one's language, in this case, one's language and one's life. What is double consciousness? Well, double consciousness is to have an understanding, a perception of how you perceive yourself in the world. So for example, I wake up in the morning, I'm just William, I'm a human being. And as soon as I get out of bed and interact with other individuals, there are labels that are put upon me. Oh, your father, oh, your teacher, oh, your man, oh, you're this, oh, you're that. So I have to have a consciousness of who I am. And yet, when I react with other individuals, there is a consciousness, awareness of how other people think, believe, or feel as though that I should live my life, and also in which how I should speak, in what particular style or what particular manner. Now, double consciousness, I think, is really important for people to understand. Because why? Because it has, I believe, a direct impact as it relates to a person's identity. What do I mean? Well, when you're learning English and you're in your English journey, how do you maintain your sense of authenticity, of your sense of truth, of your sense of self in the way you speak and you communicate with others, while at the same time you might be judged, you might be perceived, or you might be expected to speak in a manner in which the greater society wants, thinks, or expects that you should be. So as it relates to identity, I would encourage people, if you don't know more or you want to know more about what double consciousness means, to get into that. So at the end of the day, Mohammed, here's what I would say. I think that the English language has the ability to shape one's identity both in a positive manner and a negative manner. Ultimately, it's up for the learner or the individual to figure out what works best. Language, the English language, is nothing more than a tool to communicate one's particular thoughts, wishes, ideas, and dreams. But at the end of the day, what's most important for me is the following: to accept yourself and be willing to learn and communicate in the English language that works for you, to figure out who, whom, what, where, when you're going to study the language. And your identity, you are able to express yourself through the English language. But be true to yourself. All right, Mohammed, so those are my thoughts about culture, identity, positive, negative impacts. But ATW family, I want you to let me know what you think in the comments section. Let me know what you think about the video. And if you're new, click on that subscribe button, hit that bell notification so that when I drop a video, you are made aware of it. Mohammed and your brother Julian, thank you very much for your question again. And remember, the theme for this year: determined, having the resolve, the firmness, being resolute. Are you determined to achieve your English goals? Until next time, identity.